I used to believe that loyalty meant everything. That when two people go through enough life together, through scraped knees, broken hearts, and bad grades, they're bound for life. That was me and Jason. We met when we were 6. He lived 3 houses down, in a faded yellow 2-story with an overgrown lawn. His parents weren't rich, but they had a car that always worked and dinners at the table every night. My mom cleaned houses and worked late. My dad? Gone since I was 2. Jason and I did everything together. Played ball until the streetlights came on, traded lunches in the school cafeteria, and spent summer nights watching action movies on his old box TV. His dad didn't like me much. Called me trouble once when he thought I wasn't listening. But Jason always brushed it off, said he didn't mean it like that. I believed him. Because Jason was different. He had my back when kids threw the N-word on the playground. When I got suspended for talking back to a teacher, Jason was the only one who said that wasn't fair. I thought that meant something. Fast forward to last year. I was 24. Working 2 jobs, day shifts at a warehouse, nights bouncing at a bar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Jason had joined the force 2 years earlier. I remember the day he showed me his badge. He was proud. I smiled, but something in me twisted. Not because he was a cop, but because something in his eyes had changed. Less fire. More stone. We didn't talk as much after that. Life, you know. Different paths. Still, when we saw each other around town, he'd give me that same old nod like nothing had changed. I wanted to believe that. Until the night everything did change. It was a Thursday. I'd just left the bar after my shift, sweaty, tired, and reeking of other people's bad decisions. I was walking to my car when I heard yelling down the block. 2 guys were going at it near a liquor store. I don't know why I walked toward them, stupid curiosity maybe. As I got closer, I realized one of them was a gun. He looked jittery, paranoid. I froze. Then he ran. Straight past me. I stood there for a second, confused, heart pounding. The other guy pointed at me and screamed, "That's him." I thought it was some sick joke. It wasn't. Within minutes, cop cars pulled up. Lights blinding. Guns drawn. I threw up my hands, yelled that I didn't do anything. They tackled me anyway. Slammed my face into the pavement. I tasted blood and concrete. And then I heard it. A voice I knew like my own heartbeat. "Let me handle this. Jason." I looked up, one eye already swelling. He stood over me, in full uniform, face unreadable. For a moment, I thought, he'll fix this. He knows me. He knows I'd never. But he didn't say a word. Just nodded to the other officers and pulled the cuffs tighter. I remember whispering, "Jason. It's me." He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just said, "You have the right to remain silent." It felt like betrayal and heartbreak and a funeral all at once. They stuffed me into the back of the car like trash. The holding cell was colder than the street outside, colder than the cement floor I'd been shoved into hours earlier, colder even than the silence that wrapped around me like a second skin, thick and suffocating. I remember sitting there, the side of my face throbbing with every pulse beat, my wrists burning from the zip ties they'd used before switching to steel, my thoughts darting from panic to confusion to betrayal so fast I thought I might lose my mind. The room was small, gray walls, metal bench, single flickering bulb, and yet somehow it felt endless, like I was floating in a vacuum of noise that never quite reached me, that everything outside this place was moving while I stayed frozen in time. No one spoke to me for hours. No lawyer, no phone call, no explanations. Just a slammed door and the buzz of fluorescent lights humming a cruel melody overhead. I kept waiting for someone to say it was a mistake, to laugh and let me go, to tell me Jason had realized the truth and was on his way to make it right. But the only sounds were the shifting of boots in the hallway, the occasional metal clang from a cell door somewhere further down, and the relentless echo of my own heartbeat. I couldn't stop replaying the moment, Jason standing above me, his face tight, unreadable, like he'd practiced that look in the mirror. Not a flicker of recognition. Not a breath of hesitation. I remember whispering his name, barely able to speak from the pain, the shock, the confusion twisting my insides. And when he started reading me my rights, it didn't feel like a protocol, it felt like a eulogy. Like he was burying everything we had with each word. I thought we were brothers. Turns out, I was just a chapter he'd outgrown. Eventually, a detective came in. Older guy, gray at the temples, cheap cologne that hit before he even entered the room. He sat across from me like he was settling in for coffee, legs crossed, eyes too calm for someone accusing a man of a felony. "We've got an eyewitness," he said, tapping his pen against a file I assumed had my name on it. "Says you were the one running from the scene. Had a weapon." I stared at him, dry-lipped and exhausted, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "That's a lie," I said, because it was. Because I didn't run, and I sure as hell didn't have a gun. But he didn't care. Just scribbled something in his notebook, like the truth was just another variable in his little game. Then came the kicker. He leaned back, studied me for a moment, and said, "Your buddy, Officer King, says you two go way back." I blinked. Officer King. Not Jason. Not Jay. Not the kid who knew all my secrets. Just a badge now. Just another cog in a system that never saw me as anything but a threat. "He knows I wouldn't do this," I said, quieter this time. The detective didn't respond. Maybe he didn't need to. Maybe silence was all the answer he thought I deserved. They let me go the next afternoon. No apology. No explanation. No correction of the record. Just my wallet, my cracked phone, a charge sheet marked, pending investigation, and a lingering ache in my chest that no ice pack could fix. I walked out of that station like I wasn't even real anymore. Like I'd been scraped off the pavement, shoved through a machine, and spit out hollow on the other side. And Jason? He never called. Never checked in. Never even asked if I was okay. The same guy who once snuck into my backyard when my mom forgot my birthday, holding a cupcake with a candle already lit, was now the man who watched me get shoved into a squad car and didn't lift a finger. That silence. It was louder than any siren. It screamed in my ears as I walked home, every step heavier than the last, every breath tighter than the one before. Because silence can be a sentence all on its own. And this one felt like life without parole. I didn't rush to confront him the next day, didn't blow up his phone, didn't go around telling people what he'd done, not because I wasn't angry, but because I was paying attention. Because sometimes it's not about exploding, it's about watching. And I watched. Quietly. Closely. For days. I waited for the right moment, because some things can't be texted, can't be talked out over coffee, can't be smoothed over with weak words like "sorry" or "I panicked." Some betrayals deserve the weight of silence before confrontation, the kind of silence that sharpens your focus, hardens your skin, and turns your memory into a weapon. He didn't know I'd been watching. Not stalking, nothing crazy, just watching the way someone watches a stranger they used to call brother. I saw him out there, doing his rounds, chest out like he owned the pavement, smiling that new, tight-lipped smile that didn't belong to the boy I grew up with, but to the uniform he wore like armor. I saw him laugh with his partners, shake hands with store owners, give kids stickers from the back of his cruiser like he was everybody's hero, and all I could think was how easily he stepped into that world by stepping out of mine. It took me 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence. 2 weeks of thinking, not feeling. I waited until I knew he'd be alone, Saturday evening, just past sunset, after the neighborhood had quieted and his shift usually wrapped. I stood outside his building like I used to when we were kids, back when I'd tap on his window and we'd sneak out to play ball under the streetlights. But this time, I didn't bring a ball. This time, I brought the truth. He came out the front door, keys in hand, whistling like life was simple, like he hadn't watched his so-called best friend get slammed into a patrol car while he stood silent. And when he saw me, he froze, just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of surprise, that twitch in his jaw. But then it was gone, and he put on that blank, cop face like we were strangers crossing on the street. I didn't wait for him to speak. "You got a second?" I said, my voice calm, too calm maybe, the kind of calm that comes after you've been burned and learned not to flinch at the heat anymore. He looked around, like maybe one of his partners was nearby to save him from the conversation he owed me. Then he nodded, and we stepped off to the side of the building, just out of view, like this was some backroom deal instead of a reckoning. I didn't know what was happening that night, he started, like the script was already in his head. "No," I cut in, eyes locked on his. "You knew exactly what was happening. You saw me on the ground. You heard me call your name. And you still tightened the cuffs." He exhaled, but it wasn't guilt, it was frustration, like I was the one being unreasonable for expecting loyalty from a man who used to be my shadow. "You don't get it, man," he said. "I'm a cop. Things move fast. You make the wrong call, you lose your job. Or worse. And what am I?" I asked, taking a step closer. "Collateral damage. Just a mistake you couldn't afford to fix." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what it's like now." "You're right," I said. "Because I never thought I'd have to understand what it feels like to be crushed by someone I loved like family." He looked away then. Couldn't hold my gaze. Couldn't face what he'd done because it would mean admitting that the badge meant more than the bond. "You changed," I told him, my voice low but steady. "And maybe you think that uniform protects you. Maybe it does. But it also cost you the only real one you ever had on your side." He didn't say anything after that. Just stood there, staring at the ground like it might swallow him whole if he waited long enough. And maybe it will. Maybe one day, the silence he gave me will come knocking on his door in the middle of the night, louder than I ever could. But I didn't wait for that. I turned and walked away, not because I was done hurting, but because I was done hoping. And sometimes, that's the cleanest cut of all. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I first heard the whispers, the kind that float just above conversation level in a place where nobody's looking to start trouble, but everybody's paying attention. I was sitting in a little soul food spot on Jackson and 12th, the kind of place with sticky menus, uneven tables, and regulars who nod at you like they've known you for years even if they only remember your face, and while I was waiting for my plate, two cooks were talking low behind the counter, thinking I wasn't listening. But I was. Because lately, I'd learned that people only tell the truth when they think you're not in the room. They were talking about a man. Not just any man, some big shot from the State Department or Oversight Division or whatever fancy name they give people who show up when something ugly's been ignored too long. Apparently, he'd rolled into town quiet, no press, no flashing lights, just a suit and a folder, and started pulling case files, digging through reports, riding along in squad cars, sitting in the back during briefings, not saying much, just watching, and that alone was enough to make half the department sweat like sinners in church. Because everybody knew who he really was, a federal-level bloodhound with a history of busting precincts in cities where patterns had turned to policies, places where random checks weren't so random, and reasonable suspicion always looked the same shade of brown. I didn't jump to conclusions, not yet, but something about the way the cook said it stuck with me. "He's got a thing about black folks," he muttered, real low, like the words themselves might bring heat. "Always looking sideways when we come through the door. Asking questions that don't make sense unless you already believe the answer." That's when it clicked, not just the pieces from that night, but the way Jason had been acting for weeks before it. Distant. Clean-shaven. Always in uniform even off-duty. Smiling with the captain more than the crew. And then I remembered something else, right after they threw me in that squad car, while I was staring at the divider, trying to breathe through my busted lip, I'd heard one of the officers mutter something like, "He's gonna love this," followed by laughter, tight, forced, uncomfortable, like they knew it was wrong but didn't care because it played into the narrative. So I started asking around. Careful. One name at a time. Not everyone talked, but a few did. Turns out the whole precinct had been on edge for 2 weeks, ever since the guy showed up. Officers getting written up for nonsense. Body cam footage being pulled randomly. Old complaints resurfacing. It was open season on reputations, and nobody wanted to be the one who came up short. That's when I realized Jason wasn't just avoiding me because he felt guilty or because things had changed between us. He was distancing himself because I was bad for optics, because standing next to me might raise the wrong question in the wrong room at the wrong time, and his career couldn't afford that kind of heat. You see, to him, I wasn't a person anymore. I wasn't his boy from the block, the kid he shared Halloween candy with, or the one who took a punch for him in 9th grade. I was a risk. A file waiting to be opened. A statistic in the wrong column. And for a man trying to climb the ladder in a system like that, where power comes with silence and promotions come with clean hands, even if they've been washed in someone else's blood, loyalty was just a word you use until it costs you something. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me that night, not like a stranger, but like someone who had already decided what side of the story I belonged to. He didn't see me on the pavement and freeze because he didn't recognize me, he froze because he did, and that made it worse. Because for a moment, there was still a choice. And he made it. He chose them. Not just the badge. Not just the job. He chose a system that rewards distance, that teaches men like him to look past men like me, especially when people are watching. And now that I knew what I was really up against, I wasn't angry the way I was before. I wasn't looking for closure, or even justice. I was looking for clarity, and I had it. Jason didn't change overnight. The boy I knew didn't vanish. He was slowly absorbed, one shift at a time, one silence at a time, until the weight of the uniform crushed whatever was left of who he used to be. And by the time I needed him most, he was already gone. Now, he's just another man trying to get promoted. And I'm just the shadow in his file he hopes nobody opens. It started slow, almost like they didn't want anyone to notice, extra patrol cars on the corners where the kids used to ride their bikes, new streetlights installed overnight in places the city hadn't cared about for years, plainclothes officers lingering outside barbershops and convenience stores like they were waiting for something to happen, when the truth was they were the ones who made it happen. At first, people thought it was coincidence, a burglary here, a scuffle there, but I knew better. I knew what was coming the moment I saw that familiar cruiser park across from the corner bodega, the one where Jason and I used to sneak candy bars and swear we'd pay next time. It wasn't just a police presence. It was a performance. And this time, the stage was our neighborhood. The raids didn't come all at once, they came in waves. Late-night stops that turned into detainments. Routine checks that somehow always ended with someone face down on the pavement, phone smashed, dignity gone. Doors kicked in over anonymous tips. Kids lined up on the sidewalk like suspects before they'd even learned how to drive. And through it all, the same faces kept showing up, officers we'd never seen before, walking like they owned the block, like history didn't matter, like the roots in this place could be ripped up with the right warrant and the right attitude. But what hurt the most, what turned my stomach more than the sound of boots on gravel or radios crackling with coded commands, was seeing Jason there, in uniform, polished and proud, standing at the edge of the chaos like he belonged to it. He didn't bark orders. He didn't push people around. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. He was there to be seen. To be counted. To show that he was part of the solution, even if it meant pretending the problem didn't look like the street he grew up on. I watched them pull Tyrell out of his car at the gas station, hands on the hood, knees spread, engine still running, music still playing. They said it was a fit the description stop, but Tyrell's never touched anything heavier than a toolbox, and the description was just 3 words, black. Male. Hoodie. I stood across the street and didn't say a word. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew Jason was watching me from the passenger seat of that cruiser, eyes hidden behind those state-issued shades, and I wanted him to see exactly what he'd become. He looked at me. For a second. Long enough for it to register. But he didn't move. This wasn't about keeping peace. This was about presence. About checking boxes. About building numbers on a report that would land on the desk of the man from the department who liked to see activity, especially in areas like ours. The same neighborhoods that used to echo with the sounds of kids playing ball were now filled with the shuffle of cuffs and the slam of steel doors, and somehow, the kid I called brother had become one of the hands tightening them. It didn't take long for word to spread. Grandmothers whispering warnings on front porches. Fathers telling their sons not to run, even if they hadn't done anything. Moms keeping their children inside after dark like it was 1985 all over again. And me? I just walked the streets, every step a memory, every corner a question. When did home become a hunting ground? One night, I passed by the empty lot where Jason and I built a treehouse out of scrap wood and bad nails. It's gone now, replaced by chain-link fencing and a portable floodlight that never turns off. That's when I realized what this all was, a performance of control. A public display. Not about crime. Not about justice. But about fear. About letting us know who's in charge now. And Jason, he didn't just play along. He led the show. There's a sound that comes right before metal meets metal, just a fraction of a second where the world holds its breath, tires skidding across pavement, glass beginning to tremble in the frame, a horn stretching longer than it should, like it's trying to warn time itself, and then silence, the kind that splits you in half, not with volume but with finality. That's the sound Jason heard the night everything changed for him, the night he stepped into the patrol car like he had a dozen times before, suited up with that same polished badge, that same proud posture, chasing numbers and ghosts through neighborhoods he no longer understood, until one chase ended not with an arrest, but with a crash that rewrote the rest of his life. It was a standard operation, if there's such a thing as standard when the objective is to round up as many black bodies as possible under the guise of suspicious behavior. Word was, they'd received a tip about a possible stolen vehicle near the edge of our block, and instead of approaching with caution or asking questions, they lit it up like it was a war zone. Sirens, flashlights, for units from 3 directions. Jason was riding passenger that night, same car, same partner, same block he once rode bikes through as a kid, but none of that mattered when their cruiser blew through a red light trying to cut someone off and collided with a delivery truck that had no warning, no reason to stop, and no way to avoid the impact. The photos made it online before the department could spin the story. You could see the hood of the cruiser bent upward like a crushed can, the windshield spiderwebbed into 1,000 cracks, Jason's leg pinned beneath the dashboard in a way that made you wince just looking at it. People said he didn't scream. Just clenched his jaw while they pulled him out. He knew. From the second the steel trapped him, he knew. I found out the next morning, not from the news, but from Andre, who works the early shift at the diner. He came up to me with a paper cup of burnt coffee and said, "You hear about your boy?" I didn't have to ask which one. By then, even the streets were whispering. His leg's done. That's the word they used, done. No chance of full recovery. Nerve damage too deep. He'd walk again, sure, with a brace maybe, a limp for sure. But run? Patrol? Chase a suspect? Wear that uniform like armor and march through the world as if nothing could touch him? That part of his life was gone, not suspended, not paused, gone. And I should have felt something when I heard it. Pity, maybe. Or justice. Or some hollow echo of satisfaction. But I didn't. I didn't smile. I didn't mourn. I just sat with it. Let the fact land where it needed to, like a stone in still water. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't karma, and it wasn't revenge. It was reality doing what it does best, balancing. He tried to rise in a system that doesn't lift people, it uses them, sharpens them into tools, then discards them when they dull. And now, Jason wasn't useful anymore. No more ride-alongs. No more raids. No more nods from the captain. The system he sold himself to didn't weep when his bones broke. It moved on. A week after the crash, I walked past his building. The patrol car was gone. The badge no longer hung on the dashboard. The lights were off. Word was, he was recovering in silence, somewhere out of town, trying to figure out who he was now that the one thing he built his identity on had turned to ash. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I didn't need to. Life had already spoken to him louder than I ever could. And maybe, just maybe, now he finally had time to sit still and think about the weight of everything he chose.